Hello everyone, hi, welcome to one more video in my SINP series. In this video, I will talk about a crucial concept of something called a job approval letter. Something called a job approval letter. We will refer to it as JAL. So if you go through the detailed eligibility requirements of various SINP streams, you will see this particular concept coming up again and again of a job approval letter. Okay, so on my right hand side, you will see the SINP websites detail about this particular concept, about what is a job approval letter and what involves in getting a job approval letter. So here is the basic definition of a job approval letter. So job approval letter is a pre-approved authorization given to an employer to hire a foreign worker by SINP. Okay, so this is the main thing about a job approval letter. It is entirely employer driven. Okay, which means that employer applies for a job approval letter and employer gets a job approval letter, and this is required for an employer to be able to hire a foreign worker. Okay, so that is the first important concept of a job approval letter, that it's a pre-authorization driven by employer, which means employer applies and employer receives. Okay, so employer applies and receives. Okay, receives a job approval letter. Okay, now why I am talking it when talking about employees? Okay, so from an employee's point of view, this understanding of this concept is very important to reduce risks of any kind of fraud. Okay, so you have to understand that any kind of miscommunication or misinformation opens a candidate to various kind of fraud or misrepresentation in the market. So I just want to explain this concept to you, even though this is not directly a responsibility of the candidate or the employee. Okay, so the job approval letter. So let's talk about the flow here. Okay, so job approval letter is basically a flow. In the flow, if you see here, the job approval letter is a 3-step process. Okay, so the first step is where your employer or the company that wants to hire you, employer or company wants to hire you, does an online application for something called for a certificate of registration. Okay, so this is the first step in this process. We will call this as COR. So the employer and company does a online application for certificate of registration. This has to be done to SINP, obviously, giving all the details about the company, right? Once the employer is able to obtain the certificate of request, then what it does is basically again do an online application for JAL, for job approval letter, which is called a job application form. This application form has to be submitted online. Okay, we will call this form as JAF. Right? So once this job application form has been, again this goes through SINP via the employer, and once this is approved, it is the employer obtains the JAL. Now, what is again, as I explained, JAL is job approval letter, is a authorization given to the employer, but you have to understand that this JAL, when initially issued, this is a generic JAL. Okay, so so if you see here in the instructions about what is the job approval letter and how and what should employer should keep in mind at the time of submitting the application, you will see here that the job approval letter is only for a position, right? It's not for a particular employee. So it's like a open authorization which is for a position. Each position must have its own JAL. So at the time of applying for JAL, employer keeps in mind things like place of work, occupation, like whether the place of work is Saskatchewan or not, what kind of NOC it is eligible for, and whether it's a full-time job, what is the wage, what is the hours of operation, whether this job needs any kind of licensing or certification, if there is a work permit available for the employer, for the employee, it has to be included, and it may need a LMIA. Again, LMIA is not mandatory, LMIA might be needed. Okay, and then there are various other conditions, including a job offer letter, right? This job offer letter could be a template or a generic job offer letter which is submitted for generic job application letter. Okay, now once this job application letter is received, what happens is, this is what I was trying to explain earlier, that this job application form is submitted. So this is the job application form. Job application approval form is submitted online for obtaining the job application letter. Okay, so once this is done, the JAL that is obtained is a generic JAL. This has to be converted by the employer to a employee or candidate specific JAL. Okay, now you will understand that that here I am using two words, employees and candidates. I'll come to the differences a bit later and why this difference is important for this discussion. Okay, so this has to be converted to a employee or a candidate specific JAL by including the name and details of the employee or the candidate. Okay, now this employee specific candidate has to be, then the employer what does, it basically provides to the employee or the candidate two documents. Okay, two primary documents. One is JAL, which is employee or candidate specific, right? And next is the job offer. Okay, so these two documents are provided. So again, if you look into the instructions here you will see that what kind of content the job offer letter should have. Very standard, the name, the position, the wage, any kind of benefits, whatever it is. So these two documents are provided to the employee by the employer. Once this document is submitted, the ball is now in the employee or the candidate's court. Okay, now what this person would do is basically take the job approval letter and the offer, right, and then submit a application to SINP for the provincial nomination. Okay, so this is what the employee or the candidate will need to start his SINP application: a job approval letter and a job offer letter. Right, this is what it will come into. This is what you will see in the eligibility of many programs under SINP, that it needs a job approval letter and it needs a job offer letter. Right. So along with other documents, SINP, they will submit an application to SINP for PNP, and then SINP, what SINP does is obviously it kinds of evaluates and approves the application. Once the application is approved, SINP again provides two documents, okay, or can provide two documents, let me put it that way, two documents to the employee or the candidate, okay. Once this would be done once the SINP has approved the PNP application that employee has submitted. So what are these two documents? Number one is obviously the certificate of nomination that everybody wants. Let's call this CN, and then the second is sorry, cut. Start. And the second is a document called letter of support. Letter of support. Let's call it LOS. Okay. So let's talk a bit about these two documents. Okay. So the first document is certificate of nomination, and the second document is letter of support. The certificate of nomination is used by the employee or the candidates to apply for PR, okay, and the letter of support is again used by employee or the candidate, but to apply for a temporary work permit, right? This work permit is a closed work permit and a employer specific work permit, okay. So it's a very temporary work permit which enables the employee or the candidate to continue working before a decision on PR is taken, okay. So this is the process. Now very quickly, let me do a quick discussion on the differences between a employee that I was doing above and a candidate, okay. So employee is somebody who is already working in Saskatchewan on he has a valid work permit to work or a work authorization to work, right? And if this is the case, if it's a person who is already working and has a valid permit, then he use obviously certificate of nomination for PR application, and if required to extend his work permit, he will require the letter of support, okay. However, candidate is somebody who is not working right now in Saskatchewan, and wants to start ASAP to work, right? So in that case also, certificate of nomination's purpose is same, PR application, and LOS is for temporary work permit, right? So I hope this is the difference between the employee and a candidate, and which I was trying to highlight in the earlier discussion, right? So an employee and a candidate use a certificate of nomination and a letter of support in two different ways, okay. Now this has to be discussed because once the nomination has been approved, and if the person wants to continue working or wants to start working, then what is the mechanism of that? So letter of support is that mechanism. Okay, let's go. Certificate of nomination. Once the certificate of nomination has been received, what needs to be done is the candidate would apply for PR directly with IRCC, and then once IRCC approves, he gets his PR, right? So this is the whole flow of getting a PR with a very focused with a very focused point of view on the job approval letter. Okay, so let's go through the official instructions on the job approval letter. So this is what I was saying, that the nominated candidates receives a work permit support letter along with the nomination certificate of nomination. And if you're already working in Saskatchewan and maintaining or extending the validity, you can use this letter of support. If not currently working in Saskatchewan, it allows them to work and apply for a temporary work permit, right? So that's the purpose of this letter of support. So the whole thing starts from a job approval letter, right? Okay, and then this section talks about the immigration process. Obviously the two things that even I discussed, that first is the nomination process. This is the nomination process, and the second is the PR process. This is given by SINP. First is given by SINP, and number 2 is given by Ircc. Okay, let's see. The next discussion is on fees. This is also a very important thing. So I talked about multiple documents, right? One is certificate of registration, one is job application form, and then job approval letter, right? All these happen online and all these are free, right? There are no charges by SINP, right? There is a fourth fee which is called a compliance fee. This is to be paid by, this is a $230 amount paid by employer only with a work permit application. So if a employee or a candidate chooses to apply for a work permit or extend, right? So a temporary work permit or an extension of a current work permit, if an employee applies, then this $230 employer compliance fees has to be paid by the employer. Again, this has to be paid by the employer. Employee pays the work. So what employee pays, right? Obviously employees pay, right? So what employee pay? Employee would pay for work permit fees if required, if they want to work or if they want to maintain their status, they would pay for the work permit fees and then the PR fees. So PR fees is paid directly to Ircc plus expenses on like medical checkup, any kind of police verification, fingerprinting, those kind of expenses. So these are the expenses that the employee or the candidate would pay, right? And this is paid directly to Ircc. From a SINP point of view, there are no charges, there are no fee. Let me see, let me highlight. There is no fee for COR or JAL. Okay, it's just an application, it's just a compliance thing. Okay, so I hope this discussion was helpful. I just wanted to talk a bit about the job application letter, job approval letter, sorry, which is a very important document. So whenever we are applying for any program of SINP, people will see a discussion or a requirement of a job approval letter, and then that's the reason each candidate should be clear of what this document is, who obtains this, how it's obtained, is there any kind of expenses associated with this kind of job approval letter, and all the discussion. I will link this particular page also on the description so that you can go into the details of what this what the official version is. I'm not a registered consultant. I'm just doing my research and sharing my experience with you guys. So always go through the instructions, detailed and official instructions on the website, and then make your decision. But this is again, as I said, it's a very key concept. This is not a program in itself, right? So this is just a document. You can understand it as a documentation in the overall program. So thank you for listening till now, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.